The rolling hitch, or formerly known as the Magnus Hitch. Hello everybody, welcome back, and in today's little exercise what I'm going to show you is the rolling hitch. Now here we have, let me just say this, when I investigated the rolling hitch I just basically thought it was this top yellow one here, but since then I've discovered there's a few ways of actually tying the rolling hitch. This method here is usually the way it is attached to a spar, and if you're attaching it to a rope there is also this method here, which is a little bit more complicated than the first method. And then of course there is a third method which in Ashley's book of knots is actually referred to as the Magnus Hitch, which I will also show you how to tie in this particular video. So yes, today we're going to learn three variants of the rolling hitch, starting off with the one that many people know, then going on to the slightly more complicated, and then showing the Magnus Hitch itself. So anyway, without further ado, let's get on and let's get knotting. So we're going to tie number 1734 in Ashley's book of knots first, which is shown in his book as being tied around a spar. And so let's get on and tie the basic rolling hitch as such. Now the first thing that we do is, here is my working end, and the first thing I do is I get my working end and I pass it over my spar like so. Pass it over, go round, and then pass it over for a second time. And at this point here you can adjust it, and then adjust it enough so that we can then take our working end. So left hand is my standing end, right hand there is my working end. We then pass the working end over those two at that point there, and then bring it underneath, and then when we've brought it underneath we then bring it up and tuck it underneath where we've just passed it over at that point. And so you can see there, let's just tighten that up a little bit more, it's crossing over at that point there over all three. And then what I do now is I just pull it up nice and tight, and as you're tightening it, as you pull it up, it will remain. But when you're using this, the thing to remember is that just tighten it up cautiously, check it and make sure everything is correct in it. And if you've tied it correctly, you will see here that our rope to our standing end is coming out through the middle. On the left hand side it's going to our working end, and then we've got a crossing point here where it's crossing over 1, 2, 3 parts of the rope at that point there. And then if I just pull on that so it's nice and tight, the idea is then that we should be able to pull in that direction without the rope slipping on the spar. And as you can see, it's not slipping. However, if I pull it that way, it will move slightly and does tighten up, not too dissimilar to the clove hitch. So anyway, that is the first way of tying this. The next way will be tied to a rope. Okay, so in the previous one I showed you how to tie the rolling hitch to a spar, and now this is how Ashley's recommends, and this is 1735. This is how Ashley's recommends that we tie the rolling hitch onto a larger rope. So if we want to hoist a rope using a smaller rope, this way we can hoist it and the actual rolling hitch should not slip as we lift our rope. So as you can see here, I've got my working end in my right hand and I'm passing it across the top of my rope like so. The next thing that I do is I get my working end, so we've passed it across the top of the rope, and I get my working end now and pass it under the rope and pull through the excess. And so you can see now there, standing end is in my left hand, working end is in my right hand. The next thing that I want to do is I want to pass the working end over the top of my standing end and then pass it underneath the rope and then bring it underneath, so it's gone over the standing end, under the main rope, underneath the standing end again at that point there. Pull it up at that point so that it's fairly snug, We can dress it up later, but you want it fairly snug to start with. And so now you can see I've crossed here. It's coming out to my left hand underneath the standing end at that point there. And then the next thing I want to do is pass it over my standing end. So pass it over my standing end, bring it around underneath the rope again, and then the final tuck is bring it up underneath that last turn that we did there, and then just gently dress it up, pull it up nice and tight, and there we go. We've now got a very secure hitch around our rope, and it's the rolling hitch, and this is the slightly more, and as you can see, compare this to the previous ones, there's actually more crossing points in this one, slightly more difficult to remember, but to be honest, once you've practiced it a couple of times, it's easy to remember, you know, very simple. And then now that we have this attached to our rope, we would pull in this direction, and if I hold on to here and then pull nice and hard, yes, the actual hitch is misshaping slightly, but by God, that is locked tight on there, and I'm pulling that quite hard now. So that is the variant for tying it onto a rope. And now we will get on and we will actually do what Ashley's Book of Knots names as the Magnus Hitch. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to tie the next variation, which is 1736 in Ashley's Book of Knots. And just let me read there what that says to you. And it basically says Magnus Hitch. Instead of 1734, which we did as the first one, the final hitch is sometimes reversed when tying to a cable or rope, particularly if the rope is slack. So let's get on, and once again what I will do is I'll put a description down below for you to actually see more information of that if you're interested in it. So anyway, so the third way of tying this is exactly the same as the very first way, is that I take my working end, pass it over my rope, and then bring it underneath my rope, and then what I do is then bring it over my rope again, then take it underneath, and so therefore we've gone round there, and then the next thing that I do is I pass my working end over everything at that point there. So I'm taking the working end is now going over my standing end. I then bring it around, and what we're doing is just doing a slight reverse on what we did previously on the very first one. So it's going over my standing end, underneath the rope at that point there, then bring it up and tuck it down and pull it up nice and tight. Once again, dress it first, make sure it's all nice and tidy, smartly dressed, and then we have the Magnus Hitch as mentioned in Ashley's Book of Knots, number 1736. And once again, our direction of pull is in that direction, and you can see now as I pull on that, that is strangling that rope nice and tightly, and so therefore we're able to lift that rope in that direction. So there we have it. We have the rolling hitch. So if you use the rolling hitch, please, in the comments down below, tell me about how you use it, which variant you use, and for what. Because I'm always interested to hear what other people use their knots for. So once again, thanks very much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you all again next time. Bye-bye.